Guys, intro time.
Wait, which intro?
The wisdom check.
Oh, good.
Wait, no. I thought we were keeping the old intro. What's wrong with the old one? People like that one.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Too many fucking gifs.
Yeah. But can we keep the part where I yell more?
No.
But it's the intro to end all intros.
I got like what? 2 lines last time?
Do you want more lines, Tim?
Well, no, not really.
In a world without answers.
Yeah.
Wait, do you want to start with that?
Here we go, exactly like last time.
Wait, okay, so we're doing the exact same way? Let's start with the Smoky Bar.
No, it's a new season. We have to have a new intro.
More.
Not sure why we thought this would go any differently.
Oh, well. Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom Check, where Jeff and Dustin welcome a guest every week to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome.
This is ridiculous. I'm starting the stream now.
Wait, where's my die at? Well, we can't start until I botch, and it's not an intro unless I'm botching.
You're on.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Wisdom Check. It's another Monday night. We are an hour earlier than usual, so thank you, everyone who got the note today and tuned in a little early here to join us. We are doing that because with us today is JGrey from Talsorian Games, who's the media ambassador for Talsorian. So say hi to everybody there, Jay.
Hi, everybody, Jay.
And with me on the other side of the screen over there is still Jeff. Jeff is back. We all survived C2E2 this weekend.
Hey, welcome back. I'm happy to be here and trying to keep my voice together as I am down with the plague cold.
I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you.
It looks like it's
Okay.
working okay.
Okay. We'll see how long that lasts.
We'll just keep working on things here as we go.
Sorry about that, folks. Sometimes
stay ahead of the net, please.
Absolutely. You know, it is interesting. We're going to get to the future talk here for sure as the topic's going to come up with Cyberpunk content. But the question on everyone's lips here is, what got you into gaming in the first place? And what was that story like?
Oh, it's a really simple story. I collected comic books as a kid, and we didn't have a game shop, but we did have a comic book shop. And in that comic book shop was a Marvel superhero role-playing game from TSR.
Okay. Yeah, going old school there.
Yeah. And that got me into it, and I have been reading about games and then much later playing games ever since.
Nice. So start off with Marvel. Wow. So for some of you guys probably haven't run into that. That's the old D100 version, right? With colored charts, your green, yellow, and reds.
Yeah.
We did a little bit of that ourselves here a few years back. That's pretty fun. So what was the gaming group like at that time? Were they just a group of friends that you already had? Did you just meet random people at the gaming store? Like, what was that like?
There was me, and there was me, and then there was me.
Okay.
So I did not get the game for about 4 years. At that point, I got to play the D6 Star Wars at summer camp, and it wasn't until I got to college where I found out that people actually had campaigns.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that is wild.
And by that point, I got to play a lot of World of Darkness because that's what everyone was playing.
Yeah.
Because it was the 90s.
Around the 90s at that point then, right?
Yep. And then after that, things got a little better and branched out, and I got a little more variety in my life.
Mm-hmm. Well, the World of Darkness games were not bad for cutting your teeth, so to speak. And, in terms of getting into role-playing, I think they were, as we've talked about many times on the show, very fundamental to kind of highlighting, backstory, personality, and really developing some of that tone and style that some of the other games were doing in a different way, with that modern style. So that seems like a natural place for this all to go. Now, were you always interested in kind of topics like near future games or modern era games, or was that something that just kind of came about recently?
Oh, no. My interest has bounced all over the place, because I did the World of Darkness, which is a modern horror game. My favorite being Changeling of the original Core 5.
Oh wow!
Yeah, not many people say that. Wraith is second. So.
Very few people even mention Changeling. Like it's kind of like the forgotten like stepbrother to the other sometimes.
Oh no, I love Changeling. It was the whole concept of imagination dying. It's a great theme.
Mm-hmm.
And then, from there, it was just a matter of whatever I want to play. Cyberpunk, Shadowrun. We bounced from game to game to game. Earth Dawn for a very long time, and then as the group I was with got older and we had less time, we did a run of licensed games, because the nice thing about licensed games is if everyone's watched the show or read the books, you don't have to give them backstory on the world.
Right. Yeah. That jump starts it real fast.
You're talking about jumping around things like a Star Wars game or Star Trek or things like that where...
Yeah.
Okay.
Firefly. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We bounced around the popular late 90s TV shows a lot.
Okay. And they all do have an RPG out there for them specifically. So are you using that, or are you reskinning other game systems to make them kind of work for that, or?
Sometimes reskinning. I did D20 modern D20 Star Wars hack for Mass Effect, for example.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that'd be super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it worked really well. Force powers all the telekinetic force powers are just the same thing in Mass Effect, really. So,
yeah, I guess that's probably true. I guess if you want to think of them that way, I had never considered those two being that close together, but yeah, I guess it makes sense.
Yep. And sometimes I play their systems. We enjoyed the Cortex system quite a bit. It was nice and light and easy to run, which was lovely. And then when we needed a little bit more heavy, we would break out third or fourth or fifth edition. Actually, not fifth edition. The group was over by then. But third or fourth. Fourth gets maligned, but I actually had a good time with it. I liked a lot of the concepts.
Yeah, I think you and I and maybe like two other people are on that train.
Yeah, I'll love a lot of games that no one else will love. It's just there's something neat. There's something neat in a lot of games. There's always a little bit of design genius that you can take and use for something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you found there's games that have inspired you? Like, do you get to do any of the design work at our Talsorian, or does Mike's kind of keep all that under his vest?
It depends on the thing. For example, I did about half the work on Witcher Easy Mode, which is our quick start. And I did an investigation system, which will be coming out in a Witcher's Journal, our bestiary coming up. So I said one day, hey, we should have in the video games, you get to solve the mystery of what the monster is before you go and hunt the monster. But we don't have a system for that. Cool. So I wrote a system for it, and Cody said, oh, yeah, we'll put it in the book with the monsters.
That's yeah. Because that's really important when you're dealing with an IP that's established, especially a game where so many of these systems obviously are gamified. That's part of the experience that the player is expecting. So it's really neat to see systems designed specifically to distill those concepts and put them together in a way that actually flows well at the table. So like, what were some of the complications that you kind of came into with that? Like, what were the main design elements you had to really focus on?
Well, I mean, it started off with just a simple thought that mysteries are hard to run as a game concept, because it relies a lot on the player as opposed to the character, because the player solves the clues. Just like when you're reading a mystery book or watching a mystery show, you try to figure it out before the detective in the book or show does. So that's a problem. And so if you're playing a character who's not very good at it, or a character who's very good at it but you're not, so that was a big portion of figuring out a system that works but doesn't feel like you're being led down a specific path and it's the only path you can take.
Right. Yeah.
In the end, I was kind of actually inspired, going back to the whole Cortex thing. I was inspired by something I did there where you can treat things that aren't monsters like monsters.
Okay.
Back in the day, I ran a Marvel superhero Cortex game, and I treated a fire like a monster.
Okay.
specific. It had the equivalent of hit points and specific attacks like fire or sand or whatever creative things they came up with could hurt it, and or just things like removing victims, removing people that are in danger inside the fire from the burning building. That drops it down because you're reducing the danger level, and that's what the hit points represented.
Okay, that's kind of neat.
So
yeah, Leviathan, I agree. That is pretty kick-ass. That's a good way of doing it.
Yep. So with the mystery, it's the same thing. The mystery essentially is a monster, and as you find clues, the clues do damage to it, and you move forward. And clues can lead to other clues. And the biggest trouble was breaking down all the different kinds of clues that could be in a mystery, because I didn't want to be just monster solving hunting mysteries. I wanted to be any murder mysteries, thefts, any kind of mystery it could help you solve. Breaking down the basic clue types and the actions that will go with them, and then essentially it is essentially an investigative combat system.
Interesting. That's pretty
really
awesome.
Yep. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, so like, and the idea is here, like with the fire you're describing, you can use sand or water as ways of damaging the fire. So in this context, are you saying that like finding, I don't know, footprints would be a way of doing damage to this encounter? Rumors, people might have. Now, are you going the route of like kind of the old school Dungeons and Dragons where it was like the player comes up with an idea, that's the solution? Or are you looking more at the system side of it where it's the character solving it? Like where are you fitting on that side?
Technically, the system works that when you hit the hit points to 0, the mystery is solved.
Okay.
Or at the very least, you have enough information to properly solve the mystery. At that point, the GM, if the players haven't figured out, the GM can say, well, you figured it out. If the players figured it out early, awesome. The GM has a choice. They can say, okay, you figured it out, or maybe you don't have enough clues. You figured out who did it, but you don't have the clues to, in a more modern context, get them convicted.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Nice.
It's interesting because I'm using like a mystery right now, and I have that same sort of situation where I'm like, okay, listen, players, I'm going to give you a chance first to figure it out, and if you can't, then I'm going to let your players make the appropriate rolls to figure it out. Yeah. And then if either groups then are able to figure it out, you guys will know what's going on. Otherwise, it'll just be a missed opportunity.
And we talk about it in the system where you don't force the players all the way to 0. If they think they've got it, you don't keep them there. Let them do what their characters will do. And if they've got it right, that's awesome. And you maybe, there might be consequences to not having gotten all the clues. But if they've got it wrong, well, that's a adventure seed, isn't it? Either they've got the wrong person and they've just made an enemy, or they got the wrong monster and they're going to get their butts kicked because they didn't do the right preparation, and preparation is very important. Or they find out later that they got the wrong person and now they've got to correct their mistake. So it's not.
That's really cool.
It's not an end; it's a beginning. Even when that happens, the idea is to give the GMs the tools so they can plan out and lay down the clues, not to railroad them or the players into following one path.
I like that a lot.
Nice.
That sounds.
That's a really cool way of doing that. It's a simple concept that you can almost take and just put it into systems where it doesn't currently belong. Just find some cool ways to make that work. Like that's amazing. So
that's a really clean implementation too. I mean, I'm surprised that hasn't been in more games at this point, because that is, in hindsight, now I'm hearing it. That's like odd, obviously, that's the way you do it. Like
that's like the second most common role, probably behind perception checks. Like there's just your standard perception checks. The second thing you do most commonly is investigate something, whatever it is, searching a room, whatever it is. Like that's the second most common thing that every character is probably out there doing. So
I think for a long time there was this disconnect where it was almost verboten to create role play mechanics. Where you had mechanics that support things like social interaction beyond a simple role or things like that, because there was a feeling that it controlled the character instead of you controlling the character. And I think that in the last couple of years with narrative and storytelling games, that's people have really taken to exploring mechanics as a way to enhance roleplay as opposed to force character direction.
Yeah, and that's a very challenging line to walk. Like it's because we dealt with that a lot in our LARP history. So we ran a vampire LARP in Champaign, and there's always the argument, whether the very charismatic player should be charismatic all the time, even if their sheet doesn't represent it, or if the person who couldn't talk to somebody to save their life but has a social character should be honored. And it seemed like no matter which way you went with that, people were not satisfied. And on one hand, obviously, if we're not making people bench press, a door to get through and walk around in real life to get through a door in the game, then we shouldn't be doing the same thing with social. But it feels different. It's got a different aspect to it. Like the mental and social elements of the game do feel like part of the game. It's a hard one to work with. Now, is that something that is touched on in the other games you're involved with? So, for instance, you were talking about Castle Falkenstein earlier.
Yep, Falkenstein, Castle Falkenstein, Steen, however you want to pronounce it. It goes both ways. Is a Victorian era, ultra Victorian era. I call it fact, fiction, and fantasy because it has real history. It has fictional characters like Captain Nemo and Sherlock Holmes. It has fantasy because there are fairies and sorcerers and dragons. And it is very rules light. It doesn't have a lot of dealing specifically with specifics. Everything has the same base mechanic, but it has a dueling system.
Oh, cool.
Which is a kind of a sub game where you duel, and the dueling system is you play attacks, you play rests, you play defenses, and how many rests you play is based on how good you are. And the more rests you play, the more likely you are to lose, because when you're resting, you're not defending or attacking. But the neat thing is while it starts off with sword and gun duels, you can use it for chess, you can use it for social. It can be used for any skill can be plugged into it. Any ability can be plugged into it. So you can use it to simulate any competition of wills or arms. And
that's nice.
Yes. And, it just like anything else, it's not there to replace role playing. It's there to guide role playing. So, you play, you figure out how well you do. And if you are the kind of person who can improvise that, you improvise the description of what happens. Nice.
Yeah, so that's another example of a very similar style, to the investigation thing you came up with there. It does feel like it's an assistant. It's not a replacement for the game activity, because there's a lot of these things like that, or like downtime actions that are mentioned but rarely really scaffolded well with rules. That give you enough room to play in and actually enjoy the outcomes without completely dictating what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
I can say without getting into details, because I'm not allowed to, that Cyberpunk Red, for example, will have things to help with that in between, to give you story of your downtime and help with that. That there are going to be specific mechanics for that sort of thing.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, if we didn't mention this out loud, so for the people who are in the podcast format listening to this later in the future, we just linked we linked a link. How about that for a phrase? We linked a link to bundleofholding.com/presents/Falkenstein 2020. And that's going to get a very nice discount, it looks like, on a bundle of books for that game. So definitely go check that out. That sounds like fantastic stuff there. And, with the the Cyberpunk stuff, that's it's coming out relatively soon, right?
We
Hopefully.
Are aiming for June, with the provision that if it turns out that we can't hit June, we are not going to shove it into layout and throw it into the printer and toss out books. We really want to get it right. It turns out that sharing a universe with a AAA video game takes a lot of extra work in coordinating your lore and everything.
I believe
they'll
it.
be co-produced at the same time, right?
They are, and that's a big thing. Is what we do affects them, what they do affects us, and so there's a little dance that Mike and CD Projekt Red play where they work together and they talk very regularly, much like we are now usually. And through the wonders of the internet, and they work out characters and lore and dates and specifics, and we're to the point where that's not as big a thing anymore, obviously, because they had been planning on releasing soon, and the game is fully playable, we are told, from start to finish. So there's not too much lore they're going to add which will affect us, and we've got our lore pretty much down and submitted to them. And it's very much a cooperative partnership where we say, okay, you take care of the future, we take care of the present and the past, because we still have 2020 as well, and we'll make it all work together.
Nice. So for those who may be in our audience who aren't familiar with the genre of cyberpunk, you're about to take a drink, someone will ask you the question just yet.
Yeah, a little bit of history here on that world. He's taking a drink because he knows what's about to come. He's just prepping himself.
There's a lot of people may be unfamiliar with the concept of cyberpunk, or I guess anything punk related. So in this case, we're talking about games similar to wow, I just totally blanked on the name of the game. It's a super iconic game, Shadowrun. There we go.
Shadowrun.
So similar to the concept of Shadowrun, where it's older. A near future. What was the other one?
We're older.
Yes, we are.
You guys did come first. That's true.
Yep.
We did.
So these concepts, though, of a kind of like almost a stylized 80s kind of aesthetic, right? You have those like neon lights, you got like the jackets, you got big bold colors, punk rock hairdos and stuff, street level gritty nastiness, but it's almost always juxtaposed by a massive disparity of wealth. You have these super influential corporations run amok. So I'm assuming these are all concepts that are familiar and ready to go in your setting as well. Now, obviously, we can't talk about certain things because NDAs and all that kind of stuff. But what can you tell us about the setting?
Okay. Cyberpunk is very quintessentially cyberpunk. As one of the reasons why it is called what it is called. The story goes, Mike Pondsmith one day went to go see Blade Runner, and he couldn't get sleep that night because it kept going through his head over and over and over again. And then from there came a game, especially after one of the initial playtesters was a gentleman named John Walter Williams, who wrote a book called Hardwired, which is one of the early cyberpunk novels. So cyberpunk being, as you said, it feels like a very 80s genre because that's when it came up. It has a literary subgenre of science fiction, high tech, low life, haves and have-nots. The corporations control everything. You're either in the 1% or you are on the street. The big difference, of course, between that and, say, the modern day is you've got much more stylish clothing and hairstyles on the street. But basically, and of course, you've got the little mixed things. You've got the cybernetics and the question as what is human, and you keep adding all this to humanity. Does it change the nature of what humanity is? Question of what is less human? Is it the guy that's all cybered up, or is it the guy who is running a corporation which is turning people into food?
And it's a very interesting concept for this day and age, because obviously some of these older games or in renditions of the games, always portrayed the future as 2020.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The first Cyberpunk game was 2013.
Yes. Cyberpunk.
So, at the time, Mike was
title.
Yeah, at the time he was writing it, he was thinking of the world of what 2013 would look like, and he was doing that back in the 80s.
Late 80s, and then 2020 came out a few years later, and Cyberpunk Red takes place in 2045.
2045 is where the new game will be advancing us to. Now, I think it's safe to say back in when he was writing 2013 and even 2020, things like the internet was a relatively new, and it was in its infancy. Things like dial-up existed, and that is reflected heavily in what you saw in the game as far as what the characters in that world were able to do or not able to do. And even with his crystal ball of being almost prophetic in a lot of ways of things of where tech would go by 2013, 2020, where are we looking at for now that he's writing in the year 2020? And we're looking at
tell us what our future looks like, please.
Yeah, where are we going?
Well, the bad news is that in the world of cyberpunk, there was a massive economic collapse in the late 1990s and a large war between two major megacorps in the early 2020s. And as a result, the world is recovering from essentially World War III. And it's taking a very long time because this particular war was accompanied by a virus created by a very nasty little netrunner named Rach Bartmoss, who decided that if he couldn't play because he was dead, no one else would be. And it did two things. One, it randomly transposed bits of data all over the net, and everything was connected to the net at this point. So, imagine, you're trying to look up the blueprints for building your car at the factory, and it's got somebody's cookie recipe in it instead.
Oh, wow.
Or even small things like you were supposed to send 100 of something, 100 soldiers to, you're supposed to send your army to these coordinates, and one number in those coordinates has been switched with another number. And so you end up sending them to an enemy camp instead.
Oh, wow.
So little things like that happened. And the other thing was the net got populated by something called rabbits, which are basically artificially intelligent, though not actually sentient, attack viruses that attack anything they see in the net. The end result being is that when the basis for global communication is gone, and data storage, when shipping on a worldwide level is disrupted to the point where entire shipping corporations collapse, when large amounts of your satellites in orbit that handle your cellular communications are destroyed, it takes a long time to recover from that. And that's where Red is. Red is in the recovery period where everything's much more localized. And as a result of all this is you get a world that looks a little bit more like our own in some ways. Networks, for example, are on a city level.
Yeah.
And they're much more community driven. And you have a chance to do things like have a podcast or a cast of some kind where you're talking about something where before you would have gotten shut down by a corporate goon squad. Now there's no corporate goon squad to shut you down. And they have agents, which are like smartphones, only with much better AI assistant driven technology. So the future of 2045 looks a lot like now, only with more pink mohawks and cybernetic limbs.
Man, that's awesome.
The pink mohawks are coming back too. Don't think those aren't coming. I was just at a con this week and there were pink mohawks. Let me tell you. So
cool.
That's true.
It's still right on trend.
What I really like about this setting that you've just kind of laid out here is that it addresses one of the issues that Dustin and I had with modern day games, and that's that you've managed to make things local again. I think so much of tabletop gaming in particular needs that local feel. It needs to be the party is important. The people you're in the city with are the people you have to deal with. The solutions are here. They're not elsewhere, and the consequences of actions are here, and that's a big part of it. Like I've found, say, for instance, the World of Darkness games in a modern setting, being able to flip out a smartphone and just get every answer or figure out where somebody is or get your, directions or whatever kind of kills a lot of the typical style of adventures or problems that players should be coming across. And it sounds like in this sort of setting, those aren't going to be the same kind of problems.
Well, I mean, you'll still have, you can hook your agent up to the data pool, and you can get things like that. But how good you are at navigating that information is one thing, and it doesn't do you much good to know that you have to go across. You have to go to this address. When to get to that address, you either have to go around the big radioactive hole in the center of the city, because, by the way, that's where the nuke was dropped. or you've got to go, through this gang's territory, and if you're not on good terms with the Gilligans, or which is a poser gang made of entirely people who biosculpt themselves to look like characters from Gilligan's Island.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. You are probably, it really sounds really silly until they're all there, hundreds of them going 3-hour tour, and then it's freaking terrifying.
Yep.
But the information only gets you so far. You still have to deal with the challenges of the city. But for local, in the Jumpstart kit, we put out the Cyberpunk Red Jumpstart kit last Gen Con. It's out now. You can get it drive through for $10 PDF or $30 from your local retailer or from Talsorian Games. From a web store for $30. Comes with all kinds of cool stuff. But the core adventure in it's called The Apartment.
We got Jay Nov in the chat talking about how he got to play The Apartment for Red, and he said he had a blast. So one person in the chat's already gotten a chance to take a look at that.
Awesome. And The Apartment's a really cool idea. The basic idea is that someone in the party owns an apartment building, and that apartment building is one of the few non-corporate owned buildings left in Night City.
Oh, okay.
And what happens, and so, I like to start off with, okay, what does your apartment look like? And I say, we'll pull out furniture catalogs. Here's the furniture that's in it. Here's how I decorated. Here's the images here's the art on the walls. Here's what my typical day was. Get them really invested in that apartment. That's where they live. That's their home. People like shopping. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but half the fun of any video game these days is picking out clothes for your character, no matter what you're actually doing.
I play MMOs with custom housing, and I spend all day just figuring out what furniture is going to look right in my living room.
Right.
I totally get it.
And so, but then of course things go wrong. Someone wants to do something to your apartment building, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get whatever method, legal or illegal. And there's not much that's illegal really in Night City at that time. So you've got to figure out how are you going to defend your home, and the answer may not be violence, because there's only so much you as individuals can do against a whole army. But then again, it may be because you may be really good. It all depends on how you're running it, but it's all personal. That's one of our models for Cyberpunk is you keep it personal. If there's no personal reason for you to be in an adventure, what's the point of running the adventure?
Yeah, and that seems to be just built into the game itself in the setting. It kind of has that kind of anarchist or I don't know how to really describe it, but everything is, what rules can I impose in my immediate area? What is my level of influence here? How do I deal with who's next to it? And I think that's why the personalities and the aesthetic is so important, or like the naming conventions and stuff, because it is people going in there and injecting themselves into a turf, like you were saying, the Gilligans, why come up with that concept? Well, it creates a pretty strong story right out of the gate. You have a very definitive, this is my area, this is what we're doing around here, and everyone gets the idea really quickly. That's a pretty brilliant way of doing it, and it's not always that way in something like a Dungeons and Dragons game, for instance, where you go and you just have like your typical city, your village with your healers and stuff, and your town shops and all that, but this culture can be very unique, and that's a really novel thing for most gamers.
Can you imagine now? I'm imagining a dungeon that's set up like the Warriors, where you have different groups controlling each section. You've got to make it through, and they're all fighting each other for control of the dungeon.
You're almost a spectator in that fight. You're just hoping not to actually end up in it.
Yeah, that would be interesting. That would be interesting, fun variant on 5e. Yeah. So
now earlier you were saying that you'd have to go around the nuclear waste to get to a certain point to jack in. So that kind of insinuates that there are air-gapped internet services here that you have to get in, similar to way like the Matrix's kind of structure, where you have to go to the payphone to jack in. Is that the case, or am I kind of reading into that wrong?
No, you're reading to it perfectly. Cyberpunk back in the day was essentially the William Gibson flying through the internet, flying through the net, Tron style hacking where your netrunner stayed behind in the house or in the van, and they went in and they opened the systems for you, and it was fun for them, but not much for anybody else because it took a while.
I was going to bring that up. Yep. So I mean, that was an issue.
Forces them out of their bedroom and into the field of combat.
So in Red, the time of the Red, that time period, you have city nets, which are basic city nets, but no one actually connects their personal, corporate, or company, or even home network to these because they've learned through hard experience that is a very good way to get yourself hacked, killed, your stuff stolen, or worse. So your netrunner has to go with you. They have to find a port of entry. They have to be within 6 meters of it.
Oh, wow.
And the system is designed to run very quickly so that ideally you can have your netrunner, you could have a combat, for example, and your netrunner's turn takes about the same amount of time as anyone else's turn.
Okay, that's good.
There.
Yeah,
and so there's whole adventures set around just needing to get to the ports. Then, like there's going to be whole times where that's the whole reason they're gathering everyone else around is to get there for this, for that sort of a deal.
You need the file, and that's there, and so you need to break into the building, and then they have to keep the guards off your back. And the other thing that changes too is that in the old days, the netrunner plugged in and was, they were in another world. Now they use essentially virtual reality goggles to overlay it because they're on site. They can't afford to completely check out. They need to be able to wear both worlds at once, and so they can actually flip back and forth between what we call need actions and net actions.
Oh, okay, cool.
So there's people shooting at them. They can say, okay, I'm not going to do anything in the net this turn. I'm going to start shooting back at them because that seems just a little more important right now.
Yeah, and that's a much better way of doing it because I didn't get a ton of gameplay in other Cyberpunk settings, but the times I did, every time somebody jacked in or was controlling a machine or something, it was like the party was split. It was a completely solo scene, and the rest of the people are sitting around twiddling thumbs, hoping that it's interesting. And that doesn't really make for a good table dynamic. It's an interesting story, but not a great gameplay experience. And it sounds like this is a nice way of still getting those elements without dealing with that problem.
Yeah, and I think in any game that has strong social, low combat, and even though Cyberpunk can be a very deadly game, I like to think of it more as a low combat game because it could be as much about a heist or just dealing with things on the street as it can with going in and shooting large groups of people. In a game like that, you're going to have party splits. You're going to have spotlight time. And my feeling is that it should never be more than, 10 minutes for a group. And you switch back, and the net running now really work. Even if they're not in combat, the net running runs so fast that it's more like spotlight time and not like, okay, everyone else have pizza time.
Good. Yeah. So, okay, we've looked at a couple different concepts here. You've talked about, there's definitely cyber enhancements. So that's a very genre specific element there. And there's obviously hackers and people jacking into systems here. What are some other roles that players could, put on?
There are, if you want to go back into the distant Cyberpunk days of the 80s, and remember that Max Headroom had a TV show. The main character was not actually Max. It was a man named Edison Carter, who was a news reporter for a television station, a pirate television station, and medias are there, and they can collect information, get the story out, and because Time of the Red allows them to be independent journalists as opposed to working for a big corporate conglomerate. There are Rocker Boys, and Rocker Boy, despite the sound of it, is a gender neutral term because they're named after a character, an NPC from the lore named Rocker Boy Manson, who was beaten to death by the police during the Amnesty International concert while on stage.
Wow! All right.
Protest songs, and so the Rocker Boys call themselves that in their honor. They are the street poets and the bards and the protests. You can mention the Who or the Beatles during their big protest days. I like to think of Woody Guthrie. this machine kills fascists.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Using music to raise consciousness and cause change. There are fixers. And if you've ever watched the very famous line from a certain movie where they say, he's the guy that can get you something.
Right. Yep.
And that's what a fixer is. Fixer is the guy that gets you something, and you can not just work for one in the game, you can be one.
That's what I was. In the one game of Cyberpunk I got to play, a couple months ago, I played a fixer, and it was a lot of fun. So
yeah. So
it's a cool concept.
And you got the solo, and then you got the nomads. I love the nomads. Basically, I told you about the social collapse in the 90s, and as that happened, there was suburban flight. Essentially, between climate change, which really ramped up in the 90s in the cyberpunk world, and the just collapse of the economy, everyone lost their jobs. The only place you can go was the cities. And so people went to the cities, but cities couldn't hold everyone. So you had thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who were homeless. And so they went back to a tried and true tradition of human culture, and they became nomads, formed tribes, formed nations, and they roamed the wastes, not really Mad Max style, because it's not that uncivilized. They're actually fairly civilized. But they roamed the countrysides, taking construction jobs, offering entertainment, doing whatever they could to raise the funds they need to buy the gear they need to survive out in the wilds. When everything collapsed after the big fourth corporate war, and the megacorps couldn't do their own shipping anymore, the nomads were perfectly positioned to be the couriers between the urban settings. And so that's what nomads are. In the time of the Red, the nomads control travel and between urban settings. They're working specifically with there's people in space. There are space colonies.
Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting to hear that.
there are low colonies up to the moon, low orbit colonies, Lagrange point colonies, and a lot of them took advantage of the fourth corporate war to declare independence.
Gotcha.
Now
that makes sense.
What's kind of getting danced around a little bit here as you're talking about these corporate wars is that essentially nations are gone. You're basically dealing with city-states to a degree.
Yeah, there are nations, but they were, especially the United States, was so battered by the collapse in the 90s that they were willing to let corporations do pretty much anything to get the capital they needed to not collapse entirely. And so you got these corporations, which essentially, grew up in Japan and America and in other places to a lesser extent to become essentially independent nations of their own. Though the fourth corporate war ends when the United States finally says, okay, enough is enough, and the president activates the commission of the CEO of one of the corporations, because he was a former general. And she says, no, congratulations, you're in the army again. Tell your men to stand down. That's an order. And he had just enough honor to actually do it.
Wow, okay.
It
took a slightly less cynical twist there.
Yeah, and then right after that, they declared martial law in the United States.
Oh, well, there it is. Yeah.
And Night City, the central city, is more or less an independent city. It's kind of part of a larger. The Northern California is what they call a free state, where it's technically part of the United States, but it runs its own affairs for the most part. And the United States is willing to let them do it because they either don't have the resources or it's too much of a bother to do anything otherwise, as long as they're not making trouble. It's a mess. But by the time of the Red, the megacorps aren't that big anymore because they can't be. And so but you have local powers, and in the end, does it matter if you're, the guy who's stepping on you has a size 20 shoe or a size 30 shoe if it's still big enough to step on you?
Right.
Sure. Absolutely.
So how much power do these corporations have at this time? Are they, like in Shadowrun, it seems like they're like God mode, right? They're the ultimate power level. And it sounds like so far you've kind of described corporate power being pretty strong. Are they fielding like armies? Are they just dealing with assassinations? Are they having to deal with government laws? Like where were we at on that?
Oh no, in 2020 they were fielding armies. Okay. That fourth corporate war, that was with real armies.
Okay.
And there were security companies. Imagine like Blackwater on a Google size. You know, if you had a private security company that was as big as an Amazon.
And by the way, Google, don't get any ideas. I know we're here on Twitch, but come on now.
Yeah. But in the time of the Red, you will have branches of those corporations that might be local. For example, you might go in a city, and that city may have an Arasaka branch or a Biotechnica branch, but it may be relatively independent, more like a company would be. The East India Company would have been during the 1800s.
Gotcha.
Technically, they're answering to the home company, but the lag time for communication is so much that they're really much on their own. And they may not be fielding the big armies they were, but they're still employing locals and and they still have some of the best gear because they've got the money.
Sure.
But they're small enough that, in theory, you've got a shot of creating something to rival them, or at least carving out your own slice of of existence that doesn't suck.
So this world has taken a dip. Obviously, it was on the up. It was on the upswing. The fourth corporate war happens, puts it into. I don't want to call it a second dark age because it's not that far, but it's trending that direction. So are things technically continuing to get worse through Red? Like, because we know 2077 is a video game that's going to accompany Red. Yeah, that's even further down the road because Red's in 2045. So when we see 2077, are things going to be even worse than Red as far as that goes, or is it going to stay? Is it going to plateau off from Red and then into 2077?
No, by 2077, things have gotten better.
Okay, so things are back swinging up again.
Things are, depending on, better for who.
Sure.
But yeah, by 2077, things are global communications better, global travel's better. You're much less likely that you're in general moving back to a global economy as opposed to a patchwork economy. So if you think of it, 2020 is like the Roaring 20s to the 40s. Yeah. And then Time of the Red is more like post-war Europe.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha. A lot of rebuilding, a lot of focusing on the local. A lot of my highways are destroyed. And the big difference, of course, is that in post-war Europe, there was enough money to start rebuilding, and it took a lot longer to get the money in the Time of the Red. And then by 2077, you are probably more like the 50s, 60s, where the world looks a lot like 2020 again, only the technology has changed a bit and the players have changed a bit.
Gotcha. Okay. So speaking of technology here, earlier we were talking about sculpting, right? And that's a pretty significant biotechnology, it sounds like. And we've talked about cyber technology. What are some of the more novel things that are coming out of the technology in this game that kind of have an impact on the culture?
I mean, it's weird because we're so used to the internet, but having a more internet-like internet network is novel to them, and that is impacting it because before when the old net existed, everyone plugged it into their head. And because it was plugged into your head, you didn't need touchscreens, you didn't need keyboards as much. They existed, but they weren't as big a deal, and technology didn't develop the same way. Technology didn't, have hyperstacks, essentially web pages. And now that things are much more screen oriented, because fewer people are willing to plug their heads into the network, because in this world, you're starting to imagine, right? Yeah, you're going on local networks. You're going to start seeing things like hyperstack technology, web pages, and the like. So that's a big change. Some changes are actually regressions, like people saying, "Oh, you know what? Yes, I can eat this. What is essentially dog food called kibble, which I bought down at the store, but." We hired these solos. They went over and they raided this corporate facility, and now we have tomato seeds. And so we'll grow tomatoes on our roof. Gotcha. And so little things like community gardens making a comeback. It's an old technology, but it's an important one, and it makes a big difference.
with things like what you were saying, like nukes that had gone off in the middle of these cities, is there an issue where you have like fallout radiation in the city that affects the cyberware, things of that nature? Does that create a whole different dynamic in there?
It's been about 20 years since the nuke went off. It was a relatively small nuke that was detonated in a location, which means that there are specifics which will be in Cyberpunk for that. But the end result was it destroyed the corporate center, so all the big buildings. But in more of a case of it took out one building and all the other buildings, it fell, and then the buildings were so tightly packed they just collapsed all over each other. And so yes, there was radiation still. And some of it's in the groundwater. Those tomatoes aren't rad free, but it's not as bad outside the area, and it is getting better all the time.
Awesome.
And in fact, the city authorities are slowly pushing a lot of the radioactive fill out of the zone and into the bay to reshape the coastline.
We got a comment from chat here we want to relay. Jeff,
Good, you got it for me. Go ahead.
I got it if you don't hear. One of our viewers, Joe Kerr, who's a regular viewer here on the Wisdom Check, said he wanted to pass along that he started role-playing back in 2003. After his first game that night, he got home from his classes. He got Cyberpunk 2020. And he wanted to thank you for all the awesomeness. Cheers from South America. So if you would like to take that back with you also, and from one of our fans here, pass that along to Maximum Mike, obviously, who was very central in writing of those games as well. So thank you, Jared, for stopping back in again tonight.
Yeah, definitely.
South America is awesome. There's some fantastic gaming communities down there.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about that at the start, off camera. But it's interesting to see where the pockets of gaming culture are starting to form up. Like they've always been out there, but we haven't heard about them until recently. Obviously we were talking about Germany being a very crunchy system, heavy group, and lots of board games over there. But South America really seems to be jumping up now. Like I've seen a lot of people in our chat from Peru, Brazil, Chile. Some people listening to our podcast from Mexico, so like Central and Southern America are really starting to pop in there.
If you're a video game player in the MMO space like I am, you are not surprised when you see how large some of the Brazilian guilds are out there that go from game to game. Like it is a huge video game market. So, it's definitely, they're definitely there. And with something like Cyberpunk 2077 coming out, where they can get a hold of a Cyberpunk game that lives in the same world, that's an easy transition for them then back into something like a Cyberpunk Red. So it's genius that you're doing this in tandem. Oh yeah, they can get it all together basically.
Oh yeah, and in fact, everyone that buys 2077 gets a PDF of Cyberpunk 2020.
Oh, sweet.
So if you need the incentive, there you go.
Yeah, but Brazil's great. We work with a company called Retropunk. They translated and published Castle Falkenstein and De Veer, who translates and publish Witcher down there. They have been, they work super hard, and they've got a fantastic, excited community. I wish I could port them over here sometimes.
Let's see. Had a follow-up question. And by the way, folks, if you are in the chat with us tonight live and you want to guarantee that we notice your question, we have a feature in here down below. You may see that you have a certain number of cams, and that's an inside joke.
That's an inside joke with one of our members here, Cam. Waitford known as Cams.
Yep. But if you click on that, there is an option on there of a wisdom check question. And if you type that in there, I will guarantee, so long as it's not something we shouldn't say on air, we will get to your question. But the follow-up question from Joker was, do you have any plans on tackling South America as a setting in the future?
In Cyberpunk, we deal with it a bit in Tales from the Forlorn Hope, which is an adventure book for 2020. It features prominently in the lore in that during that whole collapse bit of the 90s I talked about, one of the reasons why the collapse happened is because in order to keep people distracted from how horrible things were here, we basically started wars in Central and South America.
Oh, jeez.
To destroy the cartels.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. Classic.
That doesn't sound like anything going on today at all. I don't know where you guys get these things from. I mean, it's, the fact that they wrote it, like you said, that Mike wrote some of this stuff 20 years ago is insane, right? Like,
So I don't know that we will do a South America source book anytime soon, but I don't know. I don't have any real announcements as to what we're doing beyond where we are right now anyway. So anything's possible. If you really want it, you just send in lots of fan mail and let us know.
Get that core book out there first, right? Like that's
really helps.
That's key.
Yeah.
And then once you get to read what's in the core book, then maybe there'll be some okay, so this is something maybe you guys are considering or not considering, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Are you considering creating like the DMs Guild, or I know like in Zweihander there's a lot of community based content that gets published? Are you guys looking to create like a community where someone like Joker could do some writing for what's going on in South America, and you could take it and be like, yes, this is cool, let's put it out there? Like,
we've looked at it, but it's tricky because of the uniqueness of our properties.
Yeah, because it's tied to a video game. Yeah, the IP gets real wonky, I imagine.
Yeah.
It's a lot like working with a story group for Star Wars, right? Like nobody can just write a novel now. It's got all fit.
Back in the extended universe, it was supposed to too, but it's a little more complex than that, and so it is something we're looking at. But if we hit it, it's not going to be anytime soon. It's got to find exactly the right approach.
Okay. Yeah, licensing gets to be pretty problematic with those sorts of things, because a lot of times those are incentivized by paying people who are creating content. Now, Joker is obviously taking what I said and really running with it here. So we have a couple questions being highlighted for us here. So the first question from Joker was whether you plan to, let me see if I get the nuts and bolts of this here. You saying basically you have some street gangs in play, like the Bozos, the Backstreet Brawlers, and the Gilligans. Are you looking to continue in that trend of kind of flavorful and strange, or are you looking to do more quote unquote serious elements?
Hold on 1 second.
Sure.
Oh, we're getting props or something here. He's reaching for something.
The reason why I did that is because I'm pulling up my Jumpstart kit.
Oh, he's got the Jumpstart kit with him.
Excellent.
The Rulebook, and because
look at that
question is in here on page 36 and 37. We have a sidebar with some of the gangs of Night City. Mm-hmm. We have the Brady Bunch, the Red Chrome
Please
Legion.
tell me they're Tom Brady fans, right?
No. They are exactly what they sound like.
I just want to imagine by 2045, Tom Brady's still playing, and now there's a whole gang dedicated to him. Like he's 40, he's like a 75 or something.
No,
obsessed with his hair.
That would have been a good twist. No, these are yoga. This is what they call a youth gang, a yo gang. So it's basically kids with a few older kids taking care of them. And they make the kids get the biosculpting. Now,
it's biosculpting. Is this like super plastic surgery, or what are we looking at here?
Yeah, okay. Super plastic surgery. The Red Chrome Legion, which is a neo-fascist gang. The Metal Warriors, very combat-oriented gang. The Piranhas, they're a party gang. The Inquisitors, for those who know them, are still out there. The Iron Sights, a very small, they push themselves as close to cyberpsychosis, pulling as much cyberware into the device as possible. Apocalyptic gangs, and a few others. And there'll be more. So they're still around. It are the Bozos, I have been assured. Bozos, for those who don't know, are a gang of clowns. And they are a prank gang, but their prank is a little more like, if they don't drive you crazy, then they're not doing it right.
Gotcha. All right. Does you want to take a stab at some of these other questions on here?
Well, I was going to. One real quick thing Joker wanted to know is a jump starter kit still available? He has problems finding them down there. He's apparently selling body parts for euros or something. He's mentioning trying to save up money for a kit or a book here. So is there still a place you can get the Jumpstart kit?
You can. The big problem is we do not have a South American distributor.
Oh, that's probably why you're having problems there, Joker.
It would be great if we did, but the unfortunate truth is that it's really hard. It can be really hard to get games from the United States into the market down there. Your best bet for the moment is to pick up the PDF at drive-through. It is.
I was going to say digital distribution. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't come with the cool dice, but it comes with all the text.
Okay. Let me see if I can find the link
That
for you
gets you
there.
the game and the game rules.
Yeah, it gets you the game. It's got everything that's in the box except for the dice and the little plastic stands. It does even come with the punch out figures, cardboard figures, though you do have to print them yourself.
There you go. There's a link to the drive-through right there. So if you at least want to go with that, that's an option. Let's see if I missed anything else in chat while I was looking over there.
And that Jumpstart kit comes with the apartment adventure you were talking about earlier.
Yep.
That is also in there. So it does give you the ability to play the game and a small adventure to at least get you started, so you can play test some of them rules out and understand them.
Yeah, this is a starter box, just like the D&D starter box or the Call of Cthulhu starter box. So it is. It's missing things like character generation, but it gives you enough to play the game.
Now, are we seeing a change in mechanics with Cyberpunk Red from past Cyberpunk games, or are old players going to feel very familiar with the new system as they move into it?
Yes, to both questions.
Get a bit of both.
Yeah. The idea is that it feels familiar. It's still interlock. It still runs on the basic mechanics, but we're streamlining to make things easier. For example. While I'm not talking too much about how autofire works, it is no longer throwing a handful of dice and counting each shot.
Okay, so it's making things a little more streamlined and able to run a little smoother that way.
Yeah, smoother and faster at the table is a big deal.
And now Interlock is the same system used in Witcher, right?
Yes, it is.
So if you're familiar with the Witcher RPG, or if you have that might give you some leanings towards how some of the mechanics and systems may work then for Cyberpunk Red?
Yeah, in fact, for example, the critical wound system works on a similar level, though not the same. It's a descriptive system where instead of saying, "Oh, you have you took 10 points of damage and now you have a -2 to your blah," you say, "Now you took some damage and you have a broken arm, and because of that you have -2. These are things you have negatives to." But we try to give flavor and not just numbers.
I like that.
Okay.
So we got another thing. Joker is all about the questions for Cyberpunk. You got a super fan here, it sounds like. But they're saying that in the past that you've had crazy crossovers between games such as Paranoia, Lovecraft, and Bloodlines. Is there any chance we'll see a certain White Wolf on the Cyberpunk settings?
No.
Yeah, I had a feeling that was going to be a big no.
We felt obligated to ask because he did, but I had a feeling that, that one was probably going to end in a no.
Crossovers aren't as easy to do as they were back in the day when there were house magazines willing to do them unofficially. IP is IP, right? IP is IP. I can say that we love the Paranoia crossover, and in fact, the guy that wrote it will be running it for us at Gen Con.
Oh, really?
That's awesome. Alice Through the Mirror Shades, and it is a Paranoia Cyberpunk crossover. We convinced him. He's coming to work for us at the con, and we convinced him to run the game while he was there.
We'll have to check that out for sure. Yeah, Paranoia is a fun con game.
Yes.
It's a wild one. If you haven't played that sort of thing, you should definitely look into it. It's hilarious. Just nonsense from start to finish. It's great. So, this is cool stuff here. So, what about rule systems that you could tell us about for somebody who hasn't approached one of these game systems?
It's pretty simple. D10 plus skill plus stat versus a target number with modifiers. So that's the basic core. That is the core of a lot of games these days. Back when we first put it out, it was pretty unique.
Yeah.
So that's the basics of it. It has classes in the form of roles, but they will not be nearly as restrictive as you would think of a class in a more modern 5e fantasy game. There is a critical wound system. I'm trying to think of what I'm allowed to say.
Yeah. No, I'll try not to get you in trouble here.
Yeah.
Life paths. Yep, life paths still exists. One of the first something we started with back in our Mechton days when we did giant robots. Life path is a series of charts you move through to generate a background for a character, which is great when you're playing and you don't know the world very well, or if you just want some inspiration.
And again, you can see something very similar, I think, with Witcher. Witcher uses life paths, I think, as well, correct?
Oh yeah. We love
So if you want like a model of what you might be able to look at, if you do happen to have the Witcher RPG, you'll see life paths used there. And I would guess it's probably going to look very similar to how that works.
There's going to be some changes to it. Interlock Interlock's very hackable, and it gets hacked very much so for the world that we're making it for. So you're going to see some changes. Plus, of course, different designers. Cody designed Witcher. Mike is working on Cyberpunk. They have different thoughts,
philosophies. And that's Cody is Mike's son, correct? Is that
Cody is Mike's son and the general manager of the company and the lead developer on the Witcher line.
Okay.
Oh, awesome! Wow.
Yeah, I know he's getting out there doing a lot these days too. I mean, a lot of people know Mike, but Cody's now he's out there a lot now. I see a lot of him out there when I look for this stuff. So
we got Malice of Plague down here saying he's looking at his old Mechton book right now.
Yeah,
so that's awesome. Good for him.
Mechton is the first place we did life path, which is, as far as I know, the first life path system that was specifically about background generation and not about full character generation, like in Traveler. And Teenagers from Outer Space was where we introduced die plus stat plus skill, and we and Ars Magica came up with that at roughly the same time.
Gotcha.
So, now,
Mike and John tweet.
I did get to play one session of Cyberpunk, and the person running, I'm not positive if it was part of the Jumpstart kit or not, but there was a concept, and you can stop me if we ain't allowed to talk about it, called luck. Can you talk about how luck works?
Oh yeah, sure. Luck is a very simple mechanic. You have a luck pool. That luck pool is a base stat, which means you can have a high or low luck pool depending on either what you roll or however many points you spend on it, depending on what game you're playing. And you can use that to buy bonuses for a roll, and it's 1-to-1. You spend a luck point, you buy a bonus, and Interlock is a system where a +1 or a +2 or a +3 really makes a difference.
It does. And what was really interesting about luck is we're seeing a lot of these newer games come out that have these individual buy-in kind of subsystems, whether it's the way misfortune works and like Zweihander. We're seeing a lot of these other kinds of styles of system. What was interesting about luck was that you could dial your luck pool down to exactly what you needed to make it work. So like when you're spending your luck, like if you needed 3, you can spend 3. It wasn't spend and maybe it'll work where you have to re-roll or anything like that. It was like, I'm 3 short. I'm going to spend 3 luck.
Yeah.
Boom. I succeed. You can guarantee success at that point, but now you're using that resource to make that happen.
Yeah. Technically speaking, luck is supposed to be spent before you roll, but there is really no reason if you're in a more player-friendly game where you want people to survive.
Oh, we're getting rated by Laugh Love Lindy with a party of 6. So welcome,
much appreciated.
People from Laugh Love Lindy. We're talking with JGrey, who is the media ambassador for our Talsorian Games, and we're talking a bit about the interlock system and Cyberpunk Red, which is going to be coming out later this year.
I just mentioned Teenagers from Outer Space too. Laugh Love Lindy once a month on a Saturday morning hosts a Teenagers from Outer Space game, which is a game. It's a comedy anime style game where teenagers from outer space go to high school on Earth, and that is the entire plot of the game.
That's hilarious. Actually, Joker was asking a question about that. We didn't get to just yet.
Yeah, but he's firing them out there. We can scroll back here and get it here.
So a new one.
Yep. So for those of you who just joined us, if you would like to ask a specific question and you want to make sure that we definitely ask it, do what Joker's doing here. Go ahead and go down to the bottom, use your points that you may have earned at this point.
I'm going to re-put this. I'm going to put this in the chat because Joker's asking if Castle Frankenstein will get revised, and you gave a bundle. It's actually on bundle here at the moment, so I'm going to pop that back into the chat once again since we just got rated.
Yep.
So
put that down.
There's a link there for the current bundle package that's going on for Castle Falkenstein. So
don't apologize for asking questions, Joker. We want people to ask questions. We love it. So the question was earlier if there's going to be a revision on the Teenagers from Outer Space, given that there's a resurge, a new wave of anime coming around.
Yep.
And also wanted to say thank you for using descriptive and fun names for books like Listen Up, You Primitive Screwheads.
Oh, yeah. We love us some fun names. The answer is at this point no, but none of our lines are dead. They are just sleeping. For Castle Falkenstein, in fact, we have a few years ago we licensed, or our Talsorian, because I wasn't at the company at the time, licensed the game system in the world to a company called Fat Goblin Games, who produced 3 books in the end. And those books are now published by us.
Gotcha.
Cool.
They are part of the bundle, in fact, and they are very good. I know because the person who transcribed them, because all the Falkenstein books are written in the world of Falkenstein and sent to us across an interdimensional void. The person who transcribed them is having a very nice conversation with you right now.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. So let's see. We've been talking a lot about just kind of the settings and kind of the rule systems that kind of come up here. Now, with games like this, with this Cyberpunk, there always seemed to be kind of a drive, a theme that was really trying to send home. Mm-hmm. Like almost like a lesson or something along those lines. What would you say if you had to sum up something of that sort here for Cyberpunk?
It is a cautionary tale, not an aspirational one.
That's what I was trying to say. Medicine Head getting to me there. Yeah. So cautionary tale, definitely. And so the main themes that we're seeing here again were, corporate power run amok, the lack of, well, I guess not a complete lack of community, because there's definitely gangs and, very tight, small knit groups, but like the big patchwork is missing.
Yes.
Yeah. And the kind of isolation theme seems to be coming up quite a bit.
Yeah. There's a, in Cyberpunk, and the way I see it, the reason people are willing to join Gilligan's or, these different groups and get radical changes is because they are so desperate to belong to anything. They are willing to buy into these stupid, absurd things because at least these people are willing to take them in and be their family. And that's found family. It's better than no family at all. And even if that found family is horrible. And so, Cyberpunk is it is a deep examination of we can do all these wonderful things, but those wonderful things should not be controlled by just a handful of people. And when they are, things go very poorly. And so that's one of the things Cyberpunk looks at. Which is interesting because Witcher, to me, the theme of Witcher has always been that even in a world that's horrible and dark, the important things are the small glimmers of light and hope that you can find in between dark moments.
Mm-hmm.
So Joker just posted that he just picked up that Falkenstein bundle. So
Thank you.
He's super excited about that. He must have had to sell off a few more kidneys or something down there as he finally scrapped together a coin there and he picked himself up a Falkenstein bundle. So we hope you enjoy that there, Joker.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. You'll have to tell us how that goes. I'd like to see how it plays and all that.
He streams, so maybe we'll get to see him stream a little bit of how it goes for him down there. So that'd be fun.
Fantastic. So apparently we're getting a lot of storms blowing through here. So if
I hear him out behind me also. So
if your guys' internet fails, I will pick it back up. We'll restart this thing. But it's going to be one of those kinds of nights, I guess, guys. It is. It's really interesting though when you get to these sorts of games that have this like baked in theme like that. You were saying that you have these very important things to think about. How do you envision people sitting around the table to incorporating that?
I don't. That's the neat thing about Cyberpunk. Some games you play and there are party balances to be considered and there are specifics and how you plan encounters. So many monsters per player per level, and that's great because it gives you the tools to construct things. You have fun. Cyberpunk is an open world. It's an open world RPG, even before open world RPGs in a modern context exists. Because you can play the bunch of people who are basically mercenaries taking job to job in a A-team sort of way. But you could also play just a street gang, a bunch of punks in a street gang trying to survive, or a corporate raiding squad, or members of Trauma Team, which is a concierge ambulance service. Or, there's so many, you could be in one of these wars, or you can play in space, or you can play over in Europe, which has a whole different feel than the United States, because Europe in the 2020 era, at the very least, survived the collapse much more efficiently. But they did so by basically locking down everything. So everyone in Europe has a place to eat, a place to sleep, and food to eat. But they sacrificed a fair amount of freedom in exchange. In a very subtle almost way, because it's not, they're still technically democracies, but it's kind of the democracy where the government always knows where you are, and you have to have your card, your identification card with you at all times. So and you only get to vote if you have a job, sort of thing. So
and in a world where everybody has cyberware, that's kind of a scary prospect to think that people have cyberware the way we have cell phone.
Yeah,
it's pretty common. It's not like just really rich people have cyberware and everyone else is just trying to avoid those people. Everybody pretty much has them.
Yeah, because if the companies only sold to rich people, they wouldn't make as much money, because you can only install so many cyber arms in the wealthy. But if you make them cheap enough that everyone can get them, then people are literally going into the mall, sitting down in the chair, getting their arm sliced off, getting a new arm put on, and walking back out.
Right, and that's one of the things I think that people have to be aware of, is just how proliferate, through all the different cyberpunk games leading up to this, this idea of cyberware is regular. It's normal. You're not the exception if you have one.
It's not only normal; it's fashionable. To the point where they're not asking you what you're wearing when the celebrities are on the red carpet. They're asking you, who did your eyes?
Wow. Yeah. So I am very interested in following up on that, but I do want to take in some of our fan questions here. So we'll put a pin in that one, because I'm going to come back and talk about technology. But Joker's asking about deep space, and J-Nove also wants to know about this. Will Mars be a thing?
Can't talk about deep space. It is in a relatively unique place.
Okay.
I can confirm that the space colonies still exist, and space is an interesting thing, because the platforms for getting there, which were built, the mass drivers and the launching mechanisms, were built in Africa. And oddly enough, what that basically did is that helped stabilize parts of the region, and you got a very well-trained, educated population in Africa, with the end result that a large percentage of the people in space are of African origin.
Oh, interesting.
Are you suggesting that the first man to maybe launch his own rockets and land them back on Earth by himself is somewhere in Africa? I mean,
no. That's not true. But what happened is a lot of people went into space because they need high educated technical people are from West and Central Africa.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'm glad we got the as much of an answer as we can get there. I'm really fascinated by this.
Dancing around those NDAs, right?
It is. I love doing it.
Yeah,
nibble around the edges.
We'll definitely have somebody come back after the book is out, so we can talk more in depth about some of these things. Obviously, down the road. So
some of the stuff's just not going to be in there, because 2020 had tons of source books, and not all that's going to be carried forward directly into the core rulebook. There's not enough space. We can only fit so much in a certain number of pages without making it, this thick. And
without it being a tome, it would be a tome at that point.
And doing 3d6 damage.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Just wacky in the head. And back to the technology stuff there. Even just from a non-mechanic side of things, I'm always fascinated by that concept that you brought up earlier of the dehumanization question. In some games, it's like, oh, you're giving up your soul or whatever, as you're kind of incorporating more machinery. And that's a very deep body horror kind of concept that I think in our modern culture, we may actually be headed towards cyberpunk style cyberware. We used to think stuff like ride sharing would be crazy, getting in a stranger's car. But, this last weekend I rode Uber about, 50 times, or Airbnb, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, what's the difference of wearing glasses and, headphones and all that kind of stuff, or going to the mall and get your arm lopped off and replaced with something better.
I gotta tell you something. Uber still creeps me out. I'll do it because it's convenient, but yeah. Yeah, and I want to make a distinction between going to the mall, getting your perfectly functional arm lopped off and replaced with a cyber arm, or your eyes popped out and replaced with cyber eyes, and getting a medically necessary prosthesis.
Correct. Yes.
Or thing.
Important.
That distinction was not made well enough in 2020. But it is something that we are going to work on making very specific distinctions on in Cyberpunk Red. The concept that cyberware installed in your body essentially dehumanizes you, or that's even the best term, isolates you, and encourages that kind of isolation and separation, disconnection from community, is much more about becoming a weapon than it is about becoming perfectly functional and correcting problems your body may have. But
very good distinction. It's weird how many of these concepts, back in the day when they were first kind of deployed, they weren't well thought out enough because they were still new. It was still rough around the edges. And we run into this a lot with World of Darkness games. We run a lot with Cyberpunk style games here, or just sci-fi in general. There's ideas that come up like this where you're thinking you're going down one road and then you end up accidentally harming a group of people in another place. And it's very, very good to hear you saying that sort of stuff, that you're really highlighting those issues and making sure we're being inclusive where we're able to. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. So getting an arm that basically, replaces a lost arm that you lost in an accident is not going to be a problem. There'll be options for that in one way or the other. Having that arm have a chainsaw that pops out of it, that's a little different.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a big distinction there. Yeah.
Almost more of a question of concealing weapons than it is the actual loss of the arm itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it is. Is like, in the end, making yourself more able to work in a world not designed to work with you, which is what you do with prosthesis, for example, it's just part of that. Arguably, it is therapeutic,
right? Yeah.
Therefore, connects you more with the community around you. But on the other hand, 5-inch razor claws probably don't.
Right. What's the use of these things? Yeah, because it's like stuff like cyber enhancement for shooting guns or targeting mods in particular. Like how does that change your psychology? Like those sorts of distinctions I think are very fascinating.
What is it like to live in a world where you can see into the infrared and no one else can? Or just like predictive analytics or something, or the idea of like limited telepathy, or anything that kind of invades privacy, tracking, that kind of stuff. We talked about this in the World of Darkness conversation. Like even powers that seem benign on the surface, oftentimes when taken to their logical conclusions, are very dehumanizing. And that's an interesting place to play, and it's particularly with technology, because as we're often reminded, technology is not good or evil, it's just neutral. It's how it's applied. And in the cyberpunk environment, it sounds like there are a lot of misuses potentially out there to play around with. Oh yeah, sure. I mean, you think about it, you're getting your cyberware from somebody, you're plugging it into your body. What do you know about that somebody and what they put in that cyberware?
Yeah. I just had a conversation today with a fraternity brother of mine, one of my best friends, who's diabetic. And he has an insulin device that now can predict the amount of insulin he needs and pump it into his body. And he was like, it's basically a mechanical pancreas. And I'm like, actually, it's better than a pancreas, because my pancreas just reacts to what I eat. Yours is actually predicting what you're going to need and putting it out there ahead of time. I'm like, he's actually cybernetically improved himself beyond what my pancreas can do. But yet it still has its limitations. And like you said, who is it that built this thing? What's he putting on himself? You know, how
now imagine it's a smart device and you could be hacked.
Yeah.
Or even if it's a smart device and it's transmitting his data with the theory that it's being monitored by a medical professional, but what if that medical professional is selling that data?
Right.
Or it's being intercepted in between. I mean, actually, I think the thing you mentioned was actually scarier, but you know, the person you've entrusted your information to is selling it. That's clearly happening to us day to day anyway, but it's scary.
When you have these not even shadow corporations that are behind a lot of things, it's hard to tell, you know, when you think about a corporation or a company in modern world, like it'll have a name, but when you look at the fine print, it's like it's one of like 500 companies that are actually part of a large corporation. So like you have to like peel the layers back to figure out who it is you're really dealing with in a lot of cases. So I'm assuming Cyberpunk, it's even worse because then you find out that it's one of these 4 or 5 global corporations. Now you're screwed.
But yeah, no, there's a company called Petrochem in the Cyberpunk universe, and Petrochem makes Chutu, which is a biofuel. And to make that biofuel, they grow wheat. And because they grow wheat, and you can't grow wheat all the time in the same place because that will kill the soil, they grow other crops as well to do crop rotation, basic science. So they sell that food. And of course, they have a different corporation to sell that food because no one wants to buy their food from Petrochem. They want to buy their food from a happy food company. And so they own grocery stores. And so, there's this whole chain of ownership that goes through. And so, you never know. And even if it's an independent company, if it's a company that has any kind of stocks, who knows how much of that stock is owned by, or what deals they have with, or what parts they buy. You don't necessarily need to have the car company be evil if the person that makes one critical chip in the car company, in the car's computer. So
it probably, just like the real world, things are getting like hostile takeover, rebranded, re-putting back out without any advancements or replacement of people, and just put a new company sign up on the wall tomorrow, and now we're something different, and here you go, everyone. Now you don't know it's that same company that you're still buying from again. Like,
one of the adventure seeds in the Jumpstart kit, without getting too deep into it, is it involves a drug on street called Emerald City.
Okay,
that's what it's called. It's not its lab name, and that drug was purposefully dumped there to see, because it's cheap testing.
Now we have a question from chat here, and this is an interesting one that I hadn't considered. Joker, he has a mention here that he would like to see the Cyberpunk 2020 as like the boomer generation. Is there, with this advancement of 25 years, that's a time for another generation to come up. And when you think about how I'm a millennial, but like my son already is more engrossed in technology now than I was at his age, for sure. Are you seeing this sort of a generational gap between the 2020 Cyberpunk characters and what would be a new age Cyberpunk character in Red? Or are you expecting there to be a dynamic there?
There definitely, it's something that can come up, because you're going to have your average character it's about 23 years between the end of the 2020 era, the Fourth Corporate War, and the 2045. So you're gonna have characters who never knew a world where there wasn't a scramble to survive, and that's going to create a huge difference. And they're going to be, smarter and scrappier and tougher in their own unique ways, because they're and probably not particularly trusting, because you don't trust people, and they're gonna, you think about that, what's it going to be like for them. So there's definitely going to be that dynamic. And then you're going to have people who are a little older who manage to survive, and they do remember it, and so you have to wonder if it was better or not. Sure, the world sucks, but do they have more freedom now than they did?
Are we seeing a world where in Cyberpunk we're getting your first cyber implant at 12 is like your passage into adulthood, the way that people look at getting their cell phone now, or what was driving in the 50s, getting your car was like a huge step of independence. Are you looking at something like that, even where they're getting them younger now than they used to?
Probably not, if only because there are biological restrictions. You put a cyber arm on a kid, and they're going to have to get a new one all the time, multiple new models every time they grow.
And just economically, that doesn't work out as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is a problem. Though at the same time, there are people who have grotesquely large cyber arms, for example, because that's the aesthetic they're going for, or that's what they could afford. Especially the models that come out of the Soviet area. The Russian cyber war tends to be much larger, and sometimes it's just a matter of that's what the tech that you bought the arm from could build.
Yep. Well, it brings up another interesting point that often comes up in these discussions, and Joker kind of touched on it earlier in something they said, but with the concept of these haves and have-nots, issues of tech availability becomes very important. The advantages that you can get, physically, but also mentally, really compound. Is that also a major theme in the game? Is that something that comes up?
It comes up. One of the big things is we look at, say, speaking about South America, we talk about Brazil, or you look at Middle Eastern city, very rich but also very poor, blanking on name.
Dubai?
Yes.
Yep. There you go.
You look at Dubai.
For you.
Yeah, you're looking at these places, and you have these people who are living in arguably horrible conditions in the barrios and things, but they have cell phones, and they've managed to, whether they got it legally or not, get electricity flowing up to them, and putting up dishes on the roof so they can do television. Street finds a use is a common cyberpunk term. So the technology exists in the time of the Red. You may not have the latest agent, but thousands of them, millions of them were made. And all it takes is for a nomad group to find a container, open it up, bring it to Night City and start selling it. And suddenly there's a whole flood of them on the market. So people have the tech. It's not the latest tech. It's not always the shiniest or the tech that works the best, but the tech is there. The big difference between the haves and the have-nots is that they have better tech. Absolutely. They eat real food as opposed to junk, kibble, scoop, which is basically imagine a moldable slime mold.
Yum.
Or kibble, which is literally dog food.
Now, one thing we hadn't talked much about that is kind of a real world thing, and like we said, it's amazing how much of Cyberpunk Red's world has almost prophesized how some of this would go. But are you talking about a lot of people that are in a lot of debt for their cyberware? Are you talking about cyber repo men out there coming to reclaim arms, and like people get their cars repossessed in the middle of the night? Like
there's some of that. There's people. There are people out there, who will happily shiv you, pull off your limb, and sell it. In 2020, there are people who will gladly take you and sell your organs. Technically, you need a death certificate to sell somebody's organs, but there's plenty of people that will buy them anyway. So, and of course, organs go for a decent amount because the biotechnology has gotten so good that it's much easier to transplant them. And cloning is a thing too, where you will maybe get you have a liver failure, you'll get a new liver cloned from your stem cells and implanted in you, or you will get someone else's liver and they'll use your stem cells to make it compatible.
Nice. That was definitely something I wanted to get into, but before we kind of get deeper into what the biotech is allowing, Joker also mentioned here that you wanted to say thank you again because he feels that LGBT subject matter is being kind of pushed to the fore in these games. In particular, some people in their playing group realized they were trans thanks to the full mods in game.
Yep, there are cybernetic organs which can be implanted.
Yep.
Or more likely in a general route, someone who is transgender who wants to do feels the need to do the affirmation, gender affirmation, will probably have a more biological solution available to them as long as they've got the money for it.
Nice. So you were saying that there's gene therapy and stuff like that now.
Yeah.
I mean, what level of biotech are we talking about here? It sounded like you had massive plastic surgery options. You have some gene splicing, it sounds like. Are we talking about like radical differences genetically, or are we talking about relatively small ones?
Relatively small in the grand function of things. We're not talking about taking someone and making them a completely different species. So not Batman Beyond Splicer level.
Are we looking at like Gattaca stuff here?
It's a level of a thing. There's things. There is gene therapy, especially in Europe and space, where it is literally doing alterations, but it's essentially custom tailoring genes for specific purposes.
Gotcha.
When you get the biosculpting is just plastic surgery on steroids.
Okay.
Really good, really cheap.
Nice.
You can do, and there is low-level cloning where you can get body parts cloned. If you lost an arm, you don't need to get a cyber arm specifically. You can just get a new arm. And the transplant technology has gotten better. Much better. It's very small chance of rejection, especially since it's your arm.
Yeah, since you're able to clone, you're almost nearly rejection would be nearly almost impossible because it's still your DNA.
Yeah. Now there are things called exotics in the Cyberpunk universe, and that uses a combination of gene therapy, cyberware, and biosculpting to create furries, anthropomorphic people. They aren't a different species. They, if you look at their genes, they're still going to be human, but there's custom tailoring for whatever purposes, better vision to give them more cones or rods, stuff like that. But it is super expensive.
Gotcha. No.
And sort of like a trend where, you've done everything you can to make yourself superhuman with cybernetics. The next stage is to become something more than human.
So Joker was asking if we're going to get more about the nomads, like nations from like Home of the Brave. And you mentioned nomads earlier and how they've now taken over transport, or at least control transport. So it seems like some of that is going to be in there.
Yep. Nomads play a huge role in the universe. They are very important. They are the glue that holds the world economy together, such as it is in the time of the Red. Even local economies, if you want to get from Night City to Los Angeles, it is probably behooves you will deal with a nomad somewhere along the lines. Either they're running the trains or the shipyards, possibly the airline, or you can pay them to take you directly via caravan. So they will be an essential part of the Red. They're great. Nomads are fantastic. The Neo Tribe source book, which is for nomads, is this wonderful exploration of what happens when you take all these disparate outliers of society, people who were normally travelers to begin with, soldiers who came home from wars and had no place to go because the government was no longer supporting them, circus folk who no longer have a show because the corporation that owned them was shut down, gangs who suddenly find out that their little place of power in the city is gone because no one's living in the city anymore, or the city's uninhabitable because a nuclear reactor melted down. All these groups coming together and forming these beautifully diverse tribes, these nations, and working together to survive and make their own rules as opposed to just playing by the rules of the cities that most people live in.
Man, there's a lot of stories to be told in that.
Yeah. And as an end result, they end up being some of the most well-educated people because there's a code, and one of those codes where you make sure that your children are as prepared for the world as possible. Yeah. So I was actually going to ask a question about prisons and whether that was still a thing, but Joker is popping out a question in kind of a similar vein here. In the days of Cyberpunk 2020, they used the Dirty Harry style police officer and a lot of issues with police brutality in the Hollywood style. Is this something that is being tackled currently, given the real world implications of the day? In Red, the police force is one of the few, in Night City at least, the Night City police force is one of the few citywide institutions that is actually citywide, as opposed to controlled just by a local group. There are They are very good at maintaining order where they feel order should be maintained. They're willing to do whatever they need to do it. It's not pretty, and there's a lot of bad in it. And you'll have cops on the take, and you'll have cops who abuse their power, and you'll have cops who actually honestly want to do good. And then there are prisons, and prisons in the Cyberpunk universe are pretty bad. There are a lot more crimes where the death penalty is automatic and no appeal. And in fact, before in the 2020 era, North California had a state executioner, and her job was to track you down and shoot you dead.
It was like a legit bounty hunter at that point.
Yeah, you would be tried in absence. So you didn't have to be there. They basically say they wouldn't wait for you to be caught. They say we have enough evidence. Yeah, we there's enough evidence to say that this person broke the law and is deserving of death, and then they would send the executioner after you.
Wow. So just a hired assassin at that point, just a legal one.
The legal one. And if you didn't, but it was still bad, they would brain dance you, which is basically brain dance is imagine if you are plugged into someone else's memories, living their life.
Ooh, rough.
Only in this case, it would be brain dance specifically to essentially like a form of Pavlovian aversion therapy, where they would basically reprogram your brain in prison so that you could no longer commit the crimes you committed without experiencing intense nausea or pain.
You know what? It would be another interesting take on that is, if you had that technology pumping in your victim's last moments into your memory that you have to relive.
Well, they would have to be hooked up because you have to actually record it, but you can certainly record people's last moments. But the problem is with serial killers, they may actually enjoy it.
That's potentially true.
Actually, snuff brain dances on the commercial market, on the black commercial market, are relatively popular because you can experience it without a problem. And of course, as with all things, pornography leads the way with technology.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, all these punk kind of settings, you got to assume that the black market is going to be prevalent and very important to the tone and the style of the game.
Oh, yeah.
These dark, seedy elements, these dangerous streets, this sort of stuff. So there is kind of like a mature theme running throughout most of these games that, I would say people need to be aware of before they dial into it.
Oh, yeah. No, I can't imagine a Cyberpunk game being anything less than PG-13. And that's trying very hard.
Yeah, and I think that it's safe to say that if you're out there as gamers, people who might be listening, and you're playing something like 5e, you're playing these fantasy games, and you want to tackle something more from the headlines today, you need a system and a setting like Cyberpunk to be able to try to tell those kind of stories. It's really hard to tell those stories using some of these other more fantasy-driven, hero-driven stories, or systems, I should say. So, this is a good point with where the world is today to be able to tackle these issues and maybe have some of these things explored in a more safe environment instead of, let's say, arguing with your friends on Facebook. you could try to explore some of these in a storytell fashion and see some different points of view and get some different ideas. And if you're GMing, you have to put yourself in the spot of, well, what would these people do in this situation?
Yep.
And it gives you that opportunity to explore these themes, perhaps, because it seems like everything that we're dealing with in our modern world are things that are being considered for the setting of Cyberpunk Red.
Yeah. William Gibson, one of the great cyberpunk authors, has said once that he was not writing about the future, he was writing about the present, but he couldn't sell a book about the present, so he wrote about the future.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think it's brave to want to make a setting where you can touch on all those things too, because it's brave to want to put something like that out there. Was there a big conversation about the world needs another cyberpunk book right now, like when you guys were starting Red, or was it we just want to make another book and it just so happens this is the time that it's going on?
No, there wasn't a conversation that though Mike has more than once looked around and said, that it's a little depressing how close he was on some things. And him, the genre in general. And the great thing is you're right. And there's other games too that are exploring similar spaces in different ways. Like there's a game called I Hunt out right now, IHUNT, which is about a gig economy in a modern day where instead of becoming an Uber driver, you have an app that gives you assignments to kill monsters in a urban fantasy style setting. So there's Cyberpunk's a great game for it. There's other games for it, but it's neat and important conversation to have and to look around and say, hey, this sucks. Playing out it can be really fun, but maybe not living it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a thing that everyone needs to really consider when they're playing games is, there are things that you can explore in a game that you would never want to experience in life. And I think it's true in every game. I mean, if I'm honest, I never want to experience anything I go through in Dungeons and Dragons. I don't want to go marching through a dungeon and fight a bullywug or anything like that. But it makes a really good game. And as likewise for books, like you're reading some sci-fi or cyberpunk style books, there's a lot of dark, nasty stuff that happens in those, and it makes for really good stories that are fascinating to watch or read in that context. But yeah, I definitely don't want those experiences in real life. So it's like that nice vicarious way of getting about it.
Yeah, I will say, of course, there are dark themes in Cyberpunk, but it's always good to have a conversation with the people at your table.
Yes, very much so.
Absolutely.
To make sure that it's okay to explore those dark themes or specific dark themes. Kiana, GM, who of the Teenagers game, who is associated with Love Lindsay, who rated earlier, put out a checklist, which I wish I had a link for now.
I've posted it out there a few times in my Discord and stuff as well.
Awesome. Yeah,
it's a good one.
It's a good one to help drive, start that conversation. It's not, it's designed to be, I can't talk about these topics because someone checked off, but it's a good place to start with saying, okay, these are bad things that happen and this is a bad place. And can we just, is it so bad that we can't deal with it entirely? Do we have to go around it? Or is it something that we can explore in a respectful way, or, different groups, different ways?
And what it really does well, what the list you're talking about is it gives the players the proper signs to be able to use to reflect back to the GM that we're hitting a point that I'm no longer, I was cool with it and it got to here. Now I'm not cool with it anymore. I'm changing my mind. It gives them that ability then in a formal way to basically check back out of it if it goes too far. So it's
a permission to do it, because otherwise you feel like, oh, well, I'm the only person here and I'm going to ruin the game if I do it, which is nice.
Yeah, and it's an important thing to really be cognizant of. We've talked a lot about that too in earlier shows. The social contract at your table is very important. Game zero is very important. Get in there, talk to your players. Not everyone's going to want to talk about these concepts in a group setting. So maybe talk individually to people, say, hey, here's some things. I'm not going to tell you the plot of my game, but I'm looking at doing something in this vein. Is this something you're comfortable with? If not, you don't have to explain your reasoning. You don't have to do anything else. Just let me know and I will back off of that, or whatever. Or maybe this game isn't right for you, or, give somebody the options to make informed decisions about their gameplay experience. And, try to avoid surprising people with really dark themes that could have real life bleed, so to speak. But it's good advice. We are kind of coming into the end of our time here for tonight, believe it or not.
We do have a few things we need to discuss here at the end, and I did save them for the end. So we're going to recap a little from our weekend here as we head out. Jeff and myself, as members of T22KB, along with the rest of the guys, Levi, Clint, Cameron, Tim, we went to C2E2 in Chicago. That's the Chicago Comic Entertainment Expo, C2E2, where we got an opportunity to be panelists and do a presentation on how to homebrew games. And so
It's a
we
lot
did
of
an
fun.
hour long. Levi headed it, and he did the bulk of the talking.
And he did an amazing job.
And he's very, as you guys, anyone who watches our 5e Everstorm game that he runs, Levi is full entertainment and full energy all the time. So it was natural that he would be the guy to host this How to Homebrew segment. We weren't sure what kind of response we would get at C2E2. We were in a room with 120 seats, and all 120 seats were full. There was an additional 20 to 30 people standing in the back who couldn't find a seat, and more people were turned away at the door. And we were just completely blown away by the response we got from the crowd at C2E2. The participation we got from people asking questions, who hung out after we were done out in the hallway to ask us more questions. And so I know a few of our viewers, Zombie Decoy, some of him and his friends were there. Fruitzilla we got to meet at one point, I know, was also
awesome
for it. So we love that some of our Twitch followers got to be there and we got to meet them in person. But it was an amazing turnout, and it was a fantastic time. To answer Air Laser's question from earlier, we did record it. It is currently being edited and uploaded. Editing only because some of the mics didn't pick up as well as others. So Clint's had to do a lot of work with the sound. We're not cutting any content out of it. It's just being edited so you can actually hear everything that happened. And all of that will be hitting the channel at some point this week. I think Thursday we're looking at, because we don't have any content on Thursday. So I think Thursday's the day we're targeting. But stay tuned on our Twitter and in our Discord. And you'll be able to find out when that's going to air. And we are going to do our best, I think, some of us, to be on Twitch live with you while you're watching it, so that you can interact with us while you're watching what is clearly a taped broadcast. So.
You'll be watching with us, because it was a fun time. It was very entertaining. Levi did a great job with it. And he's calling us a brown noser down here, but he knows it's true. It was a fantastic talk. He did a great job on that. And the crowd was very excited about it. And I think those of you who some of you got turned away at the door there, and we want to make sure you were able to get the content, even if it is just us idiots talking.
And some of you weren't fortunate enough to be able to be there, and we definitely want you guys to be able to see it also.
So in addition to that, though, we do have some other things to kind of plug away. So before we get back to our plugs, let's once again go through and make sure that you're able to plug your content here. So we had that Jumpstart kit that we want to make sure everyone knows about. And can you remind people what's in that?
In the Jumpstart kit, it is a starter set for Cyberpunk Red. So you've got a basic rule system, enough to play the game, a rulebook with a fair amount of lore about the world. If you're interested in seeing what the world is going to look like, how it gets to 2077, if you're big into the video game, it's got a lot of lore there. It also includes the full adventure of the apartment, as well as 3 scream sheets, which are one-page adventure prompts. And then it's got, depending on what you get, it's got maps. It's got little cut standees, which you can either print or punch out with feet in the physical box. It's got the dice in the physical box. It has the pre-generated characters, and it has a 2-page 11x17 easy reference sheet with all the important rules on it.
Phenomenal.
Fantastic.
And then we
buddy
also
Joker says he just got it off drive-through, so you made his day there. JGrey,
Yeah.
He was able to find it on drive-through, and he's got his grubby hands on it now. So
I'm glad. I hope. I hope he's reading it in a safe place. I know it kind of sucks where he is.
Yeah, true. We also had that bundle for the Castle Falkenstein, or Falkenstein, however you want to say it at the time. I'll be corrected either way. And we have that link still, Dustin. We make sure that you get hold of that.
It's in there. I could put it back in there again.
Let's spam it up there, man. Just give it as many times as we can. We want to make sure people can see it, as it disappears in the chat pretty fast. So we're going to put those in the description of the videos later on as well when it's on YouTube, so you guys can find that later on. Make sure you support our guests here, and you want to make sure you're getting a hold of some of this great content. So, Dustin, we have some other plugs to do before we wander out of here, right? So we have YouTube. We mentioned briefly there. One of those is the fact that most of our content is now going on to YouTube in archival fashion. So if you've missed a Wisdom Check episode and you want to catch up on it, you're just getting to know us now and you want to see what we've had to talk about in the past, it's all up there. And so every single one of those. We've also started putting it all onto iPhones. Let's try that again. iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And let's see, what else do we got? We also have Bardic Knowledge, which is going to be a show for music aficionados tomorrow. Cam puts that on. He's does that live on Tuesday nights, but we also put that up on the YouTube channel. And what that is he puts together music for our Dungeons and Dragons game. So he's actually working on themes for the characters right now, and he goes through and he uses different software and different instruments and puts together different music concepts and works with the audience as he kind of puts it together, shows you all the music theory and everything behind it. And it's a lot of fun. Let's see, what else do we got? And later in the week, we have on Wednesday, 7 Days to Die is a video game night. So we'll be playing that. We get together as a nice group and we act like morons, and you guys get to laugh at us as we suck at the game.
We got to start a new base this week. Last week was Potato Aguilera House, and now it's a new week. We got to start with something else for the next one. So
it's a good time.
I have generously gone in and clipped just the Horde Night base nights, and those are in their own separate collection on Twitch, so you can just watch those 30-minute videos of the Horde Nights if you don't want to have to watch all the insanity unfold. But that is where most of the insanity unfolds. So.
Absolutely. Let's see, what else am I missing? Oh, merch shop. If you are interested in any of our merch, such as my currently used coffee mug here with the Wisdom Check logo and everything on there, or t-shirts or any of that kind of stuff, there is a link to our Redbubble up there earlier. Go check that out. At some point we'll probably have some of these like interesting songs that Cam's doing on there as well. That'd be kind of cool. And then we got a stream team. You want to talk about that, Dustin?
Yep, I'll take over from here, Jeff. I'll fill in all the holes you missed.
Thanks, my throat is dying.
We are part of a stream team that is rebranded itself now as Hero Approved. And what we're doing is we're letting our fan base help decide what other streams might eventually become Hero Approved. So if you have other streams out there you think are worthy enough to be joining us as Hero Approved streams, you can get hold of me on our Discord, or if you happen to be in the Discord, the Tavern with the guys from the Grouch Couch and the Liching Hour. Our fan base is kind of combined or helping decide if we expand our stream team out any further. In the meantime, Air Laser has already done a fantastic job there of putting out the shout out for all the links for our stream team members: Grouch Couch, Liching Hour, us, and Dragons in the Dining Room. So those are the 4 teams that are currently making up the stream team. And of course, we always like to give a shout out to Air Laser, who is our mod and also a streamer herself, plays some video games, and runs the community 7 Days to Die server. Not the one that we play on Wednesday nights, but the one that's open pretty much all the rest of the time. So if you're looking for to come play some games with us, get on our Discord, get into that 7 Days to Die server. We're usually dicking around on there throughout the week when we're not busy streaming, so you'll be able to find us there. Coming up this week also, over the weekend while we were all together at the Airbnb, we did film another episode of Everstorm as a live game, and it is also being uploaded and will air at some point later this week, I think, here on Twitch as well. So
yeah, we'll get that information out.
We'll get information out later about when that's going to happen. Clint's working on all that stuff, working diligently behind the scenes, as he is right now, actually running the stream for us. A week from Thursday will be my last session of Terror and Treefell. My Zweihander campaign is coming to an end in all of its glory. So you'll want to make sure you tune in for that next week. Next Monday here on the Wisdom Check, who do we have, Jeff? I don't know. I've got to take a look because my weeks all run together.
Yeah, this convention is really throwing a software game here. It's Unmade Gaming, isn't it?
Yes, Unmade Gaming is going to be here next week. So a fellow streamer runs a lot of games, does a lot of really good stuff over at Unmade Gaming. He's going to be here. I'm going to nail down what topics he wants to cover. And we're going to talk a little bit about stuff he's doing. In 2 weeks, we have Indigo Chameleon, a husband and wife that are going to be on here. We're going to talk about gaming as a couple.
Nice.
A few other things. So there's going to be some more topical stuff coming up here in the next few weeks. So you can look forward to that if you're looking for lots of good advice columns, things of that nature. You're going to be able to come back and check out some stuff we have going on the next few weeks.
Well, fantastic.
You should have had that for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, we should have.
The schedule just
Hindsight.
didn't work out that well, unfortunately. I tried, as you know, I tried to keep the show booked a couple months in advance, and that's unfortunately just how it went.
Yeah. Well, I want to say once again, thank you so very much for making the time for us and coming out and chatting with our chat here and keeping them entertained. It's been a really fun talk.
Oh, I had a blast. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you to the audience for coming and sticking with us tonight. Do we have anyone we would like to raid tonight? I want to make sure
I knew you were going to ask that.
Pass it on forward.
Let's raid. You know what? Perception Studios is doing a talk show podcast tonight, so let's raid Perception Studios.
Oh,
I do
cool.
like their work, so I will get that set up here.
Awesome. So
just a second, everyone hang around. Don't go nowhere yet.
Stick with us. Make sure you say hi to them when you come in. Give them a nice round of applause, whatever they're doing over there. And hopefully, if you like their content, make sure you give them a follow.
We are on the countdown.
Never know. So thanks again, everyone. And we'll catch you on the flip side.
See you next week.